Hello, mentors. Welcome to our podcast series, Mentorships in Education, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I am your host, Judi Epstein. I am very excited about the wide range of experts who have volunteered to give of their time and expertise. They will share their innovative ideas, their exciting perspectives, their rich resources, and their research with us. Please continue to delve into these topics on their websites and with your legal counsel, healthcare provider, and education professional. Our guests will have information that will be relevant to mentors supporting struggling students, parents, teachers, administrators, legal support, and health professionals. We will address all levels of education with issues that affect academic performance. Our goal is to open discussions and introduce a variety of approaches to those searching for information in a free venue. So mentors, let me introduce our guests for today. Welcome, mentors, to Mentorships in Education podcast, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I am Judi Epstein, your host. Today, we will be continuing with our focus on ASD, autism spectrum disorders. And we have with us a very informed gentleman who is going to give us a different perspective. We're trying to address autism from a variety of perspectives. And I want to welcome Keith Storey. Welcome, Keith. Thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Storey is currently a clinical director at Juvo Autism and Behavioral Health Services in Oakland, California. He is a professor emeritus at Touro University in Vallejo, California. Vallejo, thank you. My Spanish isn't great. Dr. Storey has over 40 years experience working with individuals with disabilities, including 6 years as a classroom teacher. And his professional and research interests include transition from schools to adult life, functional analysis and positive behavioral supports, supported employment, inclusion, and curriculum development. And I listed them that way because Dr. Storey has written books on each of these particular subjects that anyone who is working with a young adult, an adolescent who's getting ready to transition into adulthood, there's a tremendous amount of information in these books that would be supportive of you early to ready this young person for that transition. Dr. Storey is also the recipient of several awards. In 1988, the Alice Hayden Award from the Association for Persons with Severe Handicaps. In 1996, the Hao Che Wang Fellowship from Chapman University, which is presented for exceptional merit in scholarship, and the 2001 Robert Gaylord Ross Memorial Scholar Award from the California Association for Persons with Severe Disabilities. He's published over 100 journal articles on a wide variety of topics, and he's published many books, as I just said, which we will get into later, all having to do with supportive strategies and suggestions for working with young people with disabilities into the transition into employment and into community living. I want to also mention that Dr. Storey has an Amazon page almost under Amazon.com, which will tell you all about all of his books if you want to kind of get an idea of which one you might be interested in. So Dr. Storey, again, welcome to our podcast. And I will also mention to everyone here that we'll be posting your bio up there in a more complete form so they can go through it and perhaps ask you some questions if they have any with some of the contact information that we gave. So would you like to start, Dr. Storey, and tell us a little bit about some of these awards that you've received?
Sure. Yeah, it's great to be with you. I appreciate the
You.
opportunity. The Robert Gaylord Ross Award was from the California Association for Persons with Severe Disabilities. I actually had the opportunity to work with Robert for 2 years, so that was really meaningful for me. He was a professor at San Francisco State University at the
Oh,
time.
wow.
And unfortunately, Robert passed away in 1990. But I worked for 2 years with him on a research grant on employment services for high school students with various types of disabilities. I did my undergraduate work at Illinois State University and got my teaching credential there, got a great education, and they put me in the College of Education Hall of Fame, which was a great honor.
Wow.
The award from Chapman University was for scholarship and research that I had done, and they gave me some money over a 2-year period to do more research, so that was very much appreciated. And the Alice Hayden Award was from Tash, and that was for outstanding doctoral student in the area of severe disabilities.
Everything you have done has been to support people, it seems, between the research and your outreach into the community and your writing has all been to support people who have challenges. And I am very enamored by all of that. You've done so much to help people. Most of the students that you've worked with, however, it seems, have been diagnosed with autism. Is that true?
A lot of them, not all of them.
Okay.
I've worked with people with all types of disabilities, pretty much running the whole gamut of the 13 categories under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So since I've been around a long time, I've kind of done different things with different age groups and different disability labels. So I've worked from preschool through adulthood and again, with a wide variety of disability labels. So it's been good to see that whole spectrum of supports and services that people need to be successful in their lives.
What is JUVO? JUVO autism.
JUVO is actually a Latin word for support. So that's how the agency got it. It was originally known as Ed Support Services, and started working with local school districts in the Bay Area, but then services kind of expanded to in-home ABA services and counseling and other types of services. So about 2.5 years ago, the name was changed to JUVO Autism and Behavioral Health Services.
Were you involved in this from its inception, or did you come into it later on?
I've been there 3 years, and JUVO's been around for 11 or 12 years.
How did you get involved with that?
Well, I was a university professor, and I had been removed from direct service work for people with disabilities for a long time, and I was getting tired of higher education, and I got both kids through college, and I wanted to go back to direct service and work with people with disabilities again. So I got my BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst credential, and looked around for different agencies, and I thought JUVO was the best fit for me, and it's been great. I've really enjoyed working at JUVO. There's a lot of really bright, talented, and very young people at the agency. I'm the oldest person there by far. So it's kind of funny working with these people who are my children's age. But yeah, JUVO's been a great place to work, and I've really enjoyed there, and being directly involved with people with disabilities in schools and in home cases. So
is JUVO just available to people in your community?
We're in the Bay Area, and we just opened some branch offices in Massachusetts and Connecticut.
Oh, that's interesting, everyone, to tell everyone that. All right, Massachusetts and Connecticut. So that's on the East and West Coast.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what kind of services, both in school and at home, people would be looking to JUVO to help support them in what areas?
In schools, generally, school district will contract with JUVO for our services, and we often have one-on-one aides. They're called registered behavior technicians. They're certified in that category, and they'll go into a classroom and work one-on-one with the student, or just help support the teacher in the classroom. And then my role is to go and oversee the RBTs and then help with the teachers in developing programs and behavior support plans and so on. So it's kind of whatever comes our way in the school system. So we have a lot of, from kindergarten through transition age students that we work with. Often it's very challenging behaviors that we're dealing with, that the school's finding hard to support the student. So a lot of aggression, elopement, extreme noncompliance, property destruction, those sorts of things. We tend to get those students because they're challenging to support in an appropriate way.
So would parents hire you to do this, or is it just the school systems that hire
in schools
you?
It's the school system.
Okay.
Now for in-home cases, we're generally funded through the insurance companies.
Okay.
And then we have RBT in the home, and then I would oversee that person. Sometimes we just do parent education to help support the parents, and sometimes it's really direct service with young children or children of any age, really. But often it's young children who've just been diagnosed with having autism, and we go in and work with the child and the parents and the family in the home situation.
So in many situations, this is covered by insurance. Parents
we have a few parents who do private pay, but mostly in-home work is through insurance agencies. So in California, it's mandated that insurance companies have to provide in-home ABA services for children with autism.
So if there are some parents who are listening who want to find out more about this, they can go online and look at JUVO. Is that?
They could do that, or they could just call their insurance agency and request in-home ABA services, and then the insurance agency would work to hook them up with an agency in their area.
And when you say ABA services, I'm assuming you mean applied behavior analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if I use jargon, just ask me to spell it out.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that everybody knows what you mean by that. That's all.
Right.
So if people want to find out more about these services, they would go to their insurance companies to find out about that.
That would be the place to start. Yes.
Okay. All right. We also, when we were talking, you and I were talking, you also said that you did some trainings in some of the schools, and you worked with staff to help support the needs of students in the classroom and to train the teachers on how to address some of this behavior. Can you talk a little bit about what it is that you do? Do you work with just staff? Do you work with parents? Are there any particular tips that you might share with teachers?
Yeah, usually in the school trainings, it's teachers and classroom aides that I'm working directly with. And I do some kind of formal group presentations to staff and teachers. And sometimes it's just I'm going into a classroom and I'm working with the teacher and the aides in the classroom over extended time period. It could be the whole school year. It could be a couple months or whatever the case might be. And that's more of a one-on-one tutoring situation. And it's often tied into one or group of students that are having some learning or behavioral issues. But the key thing around positive behavior supports, or PBS as it's known, sometimes positive behavior intervention and supports, is to understand the function of the behavior. So why is the student doing the behavior? And it applies to in-home settings too. Why is the child doing something like screaming or being aggressive or eloping out of the room, those sorts of things. So the first thing we talk about is what's the function of the behavior. And there's two functions. One is to get something or obtain something, and the second is to escape or avoid something. And you need to know that, because sometimes people do interventions based upon the topography of the behavior, like aggression. So they say, oh, the student's being aggressive, so we need to do A, B, and C. But if you don't understand why they're doing it or what the function is, you're just kind of doing hit and miss. So, for instance, if a student is being aggressive to escape from an academic demand, like they're being asked to read something, but it's really difficult for them to read, then your intervention would be quite different from a student who's being aggressive to get attention. So, you know, if the escape from academic demand, you'd want to do something to provide some instruction around how to read, make it a little bit easier, make it shorter, those sorts of things. While for aggression, for getting attention, you would want to teach the student some ways to get attention appropriately, like, you know, using a communication device, raising their hand, asking for help, those sorts of things. So, you know, aggression is this topography, but knowing the function is going to lead you down the right path of what you want to do.
So when you said ABC, you're talking about antecedent behavior and consequence, I'm assuming.
Well, I was just saying, like, no, I was just saying 1, 2, 3 things to do.
Okay, all right. I wanted to understand.
The ABC analysis is the correct term that we do for part of the functional analysis of why somebody's doing something. So you're right in the antecedent behavior consequences. Is the way to analyze what's going on.
All right, and I'm also assuming that when you do this analysis, you're trying to evaluate if there are any skill gaps that you need to address. And
correctly, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. Because you want to, it's positive behavior supports. So it's doing things positive, and it's building skills for the student. So it could be academic skills, it could be social skills, it could be communication skills, just whatever skills they need to be successful in that situation, so they don't have to be aggressive or engage in other challenging behaviors. And it's generally on an antecedent basis. So you're doing things to keep the behavior from occurring, but it's based upon the function of why they're doing the behavior.
What's your feeling about involving them in that process?
Oh, that's a great thing to do. So there's different ways to do functional assessment, and one kind of the first step is to do an interview, and you can do an interview with the teacher, with the parents, but you can also do an interview with the student as well, which can be really valuable. And in fact, we have a book on functional assessment, and in the book we have a student interview form.
Okay,
that's specifically for the students. So we definitely see that as being really valuable.
Okay, and there's really no age restrictions here. You could do it with someone very young and also an adult.
You're correct. Right.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. How do you propose that a teacher or a parent initiate a conversation with a child who's having this kind of difficulty?
Well, again, it's going to depend upon the age of the child and their capacity to understand what they're doing and so on. But it's just, I would kind of walk them through the ABC analysis, which is antecedent behavior consequence. So here's antecedent things that are happening. Like, we ask you to do your homework and you start yelling and screaming, which is the behavior. And the consequence is, well, we withdraw the demand for doing the homework, and you don't do the homework. So you're not learning what you need to do. So we're going to change it around a little bit. So we're going on an antecedent basis, we're going to provide a little instruction on the homework, and we're going to have a quiet time to do it, and we're going to help you. We're going to make it easy. We're going to do what's called chunking, which is breaking it down into smaller parts to work on it. And then when you get your homework done, you can choose a reinforcer as a consequence, and you could have some screen time. We could play a family game, could have a special dessert, whatever the case might be. So it would just be informing them of what's going to happen and kind of walking them through the ABC analysis.
That's a great example. And, as a parent myself, I could see using that in many different situations. So if I was to follow that process that you just gave, I would be able to apply that to a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum on the floor because they don't want to put their pajamas on at that moment, to a young adult who may be having second thoughts about going to a particular social event and reacting negatively about being taken out of the house.
Right. So then like the person who's reacting negatively to the social event, you can say, okay, on an antecedent basis, we're going to teach you some calming strategies, self-calming strategies, and we're going to do some social skills instruction about things you need to do when you're at the event. And then as a consequence, we're going to give you a reinforcer for doing those things. And it could be something that you choose from. Here's some opportunities that we can do. And it can be something really big, like we're going to go to Disneyland for the weekend, or it could be we're going to order pizza tonight, or whatever the case might be.
And kind of leading into a couple of the books that you have written, I just want to throw these titles out there. One of them is Positive Behavior Supports in Classrooms and Schools. And the other is Positive Behavior Supports for Adults with Disabilities in Employment. So let's just talk about the first one for a minute. Can you give me kind of an overview about how this book about positive behavior supports in classrooms and schools might be supportive of staff in schools who are struggling with working with children with behavior issues? Is it how specific are these examples, and what's the protocol you're suggesting for the teachers to learn about this, not to use with the students?
Right. So both of those books I co-authored with Nicole Post, and I just want to give her a shout out because she did a great job in collaborating with me on the books. But the Positive Behavior Support book, we kind of systematically walk teachers or whoever's reading it through the process. So we start out with a brief overview of what applied behavior analysis is and what positive behavior supports are. And then we talk a little bit about what's behavior. So behavior isn't something this is observable. So that's different than looking at inner states like, oh, the student's depressed or the student's, not happy, things like that. And then we talk about how to take data or record data on behavior so that you know if what you're doing is working or not. So that's an important piece because you want to be taking data. So for instance, you have a student who's being aggressive. Well, you could take data on how often they're aggressive, and then that would tell you if what you're doing is decreasing the behavior over time, which is what you want. And then we talk about functions of behavior, and then we talk about reinforcement and punishment strategies. So we have a chapter on reinforcement and a chapter on punishment. And then we have a chapter on self-management strategies for students. We have a chapter on social skills instruction, and we have a chapter on classroom arrangements and kind of classroom management types of things. And then we have a chapter on collaborating with parents and others. So how to collaborate with families, but also like the juvenile justice system or mental health services, things that, maybe supports that may be coming into school or the student may be going out to get supports from. So we just kind of try and walk teachers through that. And we tried to write the book for just teachers and service providers and not other academics. So we tried to avoid a lot of jargon and research types of things and just make it really practical and have lots of examples in the books about how things work. So each chapter starts out with 2 case studies that kind of highlight the issues that the chapter talks about.
That's interesting, because I think those examples are, from what the feedback that I get from listeners, when examples, when the guests refer to those, are probably one of the most important ways for parents to clarify what it is that they need to do, and teachers as well. It's a very concrete way for them to connect with the behavior that they need to develop with the child that they're working with.
Right.
One of the questions I get asked very often is, and you just mentioned the word punishment, and we've used the word consequence. What's the difference between punishment and consequence?
Well, a consequence is something that happens after the behavior occurs. Mm-hmm. And it can be a positive consequence, it can be a negative consequence, it can be a desirable consequence or an undesirable consequence, but it's just something that's happening after the behavior occurs that's related to the behavior. Now, punishment, there's 2 types of punishment. There's type 1 punishment, which is the presentation of a stimulus following a behavior that results in a decrease in the behavior. Mm-hmm. So that's a technical way of saying the person does something and you give them something that decreases their behavior. Uh-huh. Like the student, the student is asked to do something and they say, bleep you to the teacher. Right. And the teacher says, okay, don't do that, which is giving them a verbal reprimand. Right. Now, type 2 punishment is the removal of something that's been delivered previously following a behavior that results in a decrease in the behavior. So say the teacher has a point system in place and the student has earned points and they mouth off to the teacher and the teacher says, oh, mouthing off costs you 5 points. So that's punishing that behavior by taking away the points. So some people think punishment is always bad, but punishment can be a very effective intervention, and punishment is really part of the human process. So we all get punished in life if we want to or not. Now, I don't think aversive punishment is useful or even ethical to use. So we don't want to hurt people using electric shock or things like that.
Even though we may think of it.
Right, yeah. But it's not a good strategy to use. But punishment itself is neither good nor bad. It's just something that decreases behavior.
Do some of the ideas and suggestions that you have in these books, are they based on any of your own research?
Sometimes, yeah. So we've done research on functional assessment and positive behavior support strategies, social skills instruction, self-management strategies. I'm a real strong believer in self-management strategies where you're teaching the person to control their own behavior so they have more control over their own lives and they're not dependent upon others to always be there or tell them what to do.
So teaching children, young adults with challenges to be more independent, I would imagine would also reduce some of the anxiety that they have.
It can, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Functioning. One of the other books that we've talked a little bit about the systematic instruction of functional skills for students with disabilities, which we've kind of alluded to a little bit. But one of the other books that you had was The Road Ahead, about transitions to adult life. And I didn't read the whole thing, but I did look at parts of it. And there are so many things in there that we don't really think about how a young adult is going to be able to get a job and function within the work environment and prepare them certain social skills. even looking for a place to live or whether they can live independently. A lot of us don't think about these things with a child who has some challenges. There's transitions that kids have throughout their whole life, from elementary school to high school, from high school to college. Too many children with challenges, as I think I read in one of the things you wrote, don't go to college. Too many of them don't even go to college. So I know I'm giving you a lot of stuff here, but there are a lot of things to consider. Certainly this book would be more pointed in addressing them, but can you kind of give us an overview of some of the challenges in this area?
Sure, yeah. So the Road Ahead book, I co-edited with Dawn Hunter, just to recognize Dawn's contribution. Yep. And in the first couple chapters of the book are on self-determination and self-advocacy. So it's part of it is when the students are in school, teaching them how to know what they want rather than what people are telling them what they want. So, you know, do you want to go to college? Do you want to have a job? Do you want to live with your parents? Do you want to live on your own? You know, just making some informed choices around some of those issues. It really needs to start early. And if students are having IEPs, I highly recommend that they be at the IEP. And Jim Martin and some others have developed some strategies for self-directed IEPs, where the student is in charge of their IEP as they're older.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, this is what I want in my life. How are you going to help me get there? And so Jim and the others have developed some curriculum around that and some strategies for students to use on their own, how to develop a PowerPoint on what they want and things. So you kind of have to do that initially so that you're really giving the person the life that they want. And but you have to educate them about the choices and options that are out there, because a lot of students with disabilities don't necessarily know of, you know, like going to college, where there's, you know, disabled student services program that can help them be successful. So they would need to get hooked up with that program before they go to college and those sorts of things.
So that's the community services, being aware of community services that you talk about in your book.
Yeah, what, you know, but what options are out there for individuals? You know, there's four-year colleges, there's community colleges, there's technical colleges. So there's a lot of different ways a student can go. I like to think of it as, you know, there's different paths to a good life. And
what a great quote.
Yeah, so there's, you know, there's not one path that everybody goes down. We've all taken different paths, but what we want is for students to have a great quality of life as adults. And part of that involves that they have a job that pays a reasonable amount of money and has good benefits, and they live in a nice place. They might live by themselves, they might live with roommates, they might live in a house, they might live in an apartment. Again, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's their life, but we want them to have a good quality of life.
So let's bullet point some of these areas that need to be considered during the transition process.
Right, so one thing is that when students are in elementary school, they need to start developing some job skills. And you might think, well, elementary is too soon to be doing that. They're too young. But it could be things like, well, you have a job to do in the classroom. You know, you're passing out papers, you're the line leader, you know, you're responsible for cleaning up your desk. You take notes to the office, things like that. I was in a elementary school a number of years ago. I had a student teacher, and every student in the class had a job to do. There was the greeter, there was the telephone answerer, there were the passer out paper people, and they rotated through the jobs on a weekly basis. But every student in the class had a job that they had to do. So that's teaching them some basic, you know, job skills that are successful. And then once a student gets older, they need to start being educated about different jobs that are out there and things that they might be interested in. And then generally, what I recommend is when a student turns 16, they start having some job experiences in the community. And it's helpful if the school district has some, training sites. And it could be, we have a site at a fast food place, we have a site at the pharmacy, we have a site at the grocery store, just things like that. And then students can rotate through them on, like a monthly basis or every 3 months or something. But they're just getting some real life experience. It's like, do I like to work outdoors? Do I like to work indoors? Do I like to work with a lot of people? Do I like to work by myself? Do I like to work where I'm sitting down? Do I like to work where I'm moving around a lot? And you can talk about those things, but you don't really know till you get out there.
Good
so,
questions.
Yeah, so that sort of thing where students are rotated through a lot of different job sites early on gives them some of that information and feedback on what sort of job they might be interested in or what sort of career. And then students should get more job experience as they get older. And then there's the point of transition services, which Nick Cherito and myself and some other people kind of developed, that the last day of high school is the same as the first day after high school. So it's like you have a job and you just continue in that job. And you don't have to, be assessed by adult service agency and wait and go through Department of Rehab and so on. It's just you're just continuing on in that life. That's more for students who are not going to college. But it's just that, by the time you're exiting high school, you've got the skills and the supports in place to be successful. And then the adult service system just kind of picks you up and keeps you going.
Colleges, from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, are not obligated to honor an IEP that a student brings into the school, but many of them are today. Are you finding that's the case? Am I correct in what I'm saying?
That's my understanding. I'm not an attorney or a judge, but I still have nightmares from the law class in my doctoral program. But my understanding is that the IEP is just for the K-12 system.
Okay.
And once you exit out of the IEP or out of the high school system or K-12 system, then the IEP is no longer in place. Now, you can have a Department of Rehabilitation plan or an individual program plan through adult service system. In California, we have the regional center system. So there's other things that come into play. There's 504 section of the Rehabilitation Act of 1977.
Right.
So there's different things in place, but there's not the IEP that's going to be in place.
Some of the schools around here request to see the IEP and have special support rooms for students to avail themselves of teachers and tutors that come in and work with them. Is this something that you work with parents and trying to find schools that have these kind of support services?
Yeah, most colleges and universities have some sort of disabled student program.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yeah, and then students would just need to have verification that they have a disability. And that could be the IEP or something like that they have. And then that would make them eligible for the DSP services.
Do you work with parents individually?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah.
In what capacity do you do that? How do you?
Usually I'm brought in as a consultant in a legal case. So usually the parents or their attorney will bring me in to work with the school district or agency or whatever, either to help them develop services, or if it's already gone to court, I'll sometimes be brought as an expert witness.
Okay, that's what I was kind of hoping you would say, because we had talked about that, and you had said that sometimes you do that, but I wasn't quite sure what it was that you did. So if you were brought in as an expert witness, what would it be that you would be witnessing? Is it the behavior or the validation of the disability?
Yeah, at that point the case is in court. Right. And so the attorneys are usually before the judge, and then I'm brought in and grilled by the attorneys about is this an appropriate program? Did they do this right? Did they do that wrong? That sorts of stuff. Fortunately, I've only done that a couple times. But if it's a case with the school district, then we have in California, we have Disability Rights of California, which is a state advocacy agency. So sometimes they'll bring me in on a case and have me work with the district, could be with the teacher or administrators or whatever, and come up with recommendations as to what should be done.
Do you travel to do any of this, Dr. Storey?
Sometimes, yeah.
So, okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Sometimes I just do private consulting. So, it's kind of random. People kind of call me up and whatever.
That's kind of neat. All right. Yeah. We were talking, I'm going to back up just a little bit because there's one other thing I want to ask you before I move on. We talked about this systemic instruction? A functional
systematic instruction.
Okay, yeah. I spelled it wrong. So I'm not familiar with that systematic instruction. What is it? A particular procedure that you follow, or why have you called it that?
That's what it's historically been called. So there's different components of systematic instruction of functional skills. So functional skills are something that the person needs to have to be successful in life. If you can't do the skill, then somebody has to do it for you. Like if you can't tie your shoe, somebody's going to have to tie your shoe for you. If you can't brush your teeth, somebody's going to have to brush your teeth for you. If you can't get dressed, somebody's going to have to dress you. So those are kind of functional skills that the person needs to be successful. It could be social skills. It could be self-management skills. It could be cooking skills. It could be how to cross the street, how to ride the bus. Those are all kind of functional skills.
I would imagine all these are evaluated when you're doing that assessment of during the transition process.
Right. Yeah.
These would come into play.
Right. Yeah. If you can't get to and from work, it's hard to hold a job. So you need to know how to get on the bus or whatever system you're using to get to and from work. If you can't, use the bathroom, that's going to make it really hard for you to get a job. If you can't greet people, that's going to make it hard for you to survive the interview process to get a job. So those are skills that people need to be successful in life. And then the systematic instruction part is how you go about teaching those skills. So again, there's a variety of techniques, but one strategy that we advocate in the book, and that's a book I co-authored with Craig Miner, just to acknowledge Craig in that, is that using a task analysis methodology. So task analysis is breaking a task down into step-by-step behaviors that the person has to do. And then you're just kind of teaching them each of the steps in the chain so that they can do the whole task. Like brushing your teeth, you have to get out your toothbrush and get the toothpaste out and take the cap off the toothpaste and put the toothpaste on the toothbrush and then put the toothbrush in your mouth and do the upper left quadrant for 30 seconds and so on. So it's just step by step of what the person has to do and then teaching them those steps.
Is that in this book?
That is in the book.
In this book. Wow.
Yeah.
How many different skills do you do that with, or do you just give it as an example for one or two?
We just give some examples and say, here's how you do a task analysis. So that's just one strategy that's in the book. But you can do a task analysis for pretty much any skill that the person needs.
Yeah, but we don't think of, most people don't think of all those little things that have to be done with a task. We take them for granted.
Right. And sometimes it's just big steps like clean the bathroom, clean the living room, clean the bedroom. But sometimes it's really minute steps. It's like, you have to take out the pan that you're going to put the food in, and then you have to, here's how you take the egg and crack it and so on. But a lot of cookbooks are really task analysis of what you do to
Oh, wow. I
prepare
never
the
thought
meal.
about that. Right.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that. That's
Yeah, but
absolutely true.
task analysis methodology was really developed in the late 60s, early 70s by a person named Mark Gold. And there's some videos of Mark Gold online that I'd recommend people take a look at. They're really quite impressive. He had what he called his method was try another way, but it's basically just task analysis and systematic instruction. But,
well, if I can find the links for those, maybe we'll put them
yeah,
on
if
the
you just
podcast.
you just put them into YouTube, there's some really great videos there.
Mark Gold.
Yeah, he was a brilliant person.
All right. So one more question. We're kind of running out of time, but I want to kind of get into a little bit with these books that you've written, because so many of them are very, very specific and helping to define a process, a particular process. I would imagine these books could be used during college courses or workshops. Do you recommend that?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a college professor, of course, I used my own books in my classes, but other professors use them too. So they can be used in college courses. But we tried to make it, again, would not write the books for academics, but write it for teachers and parents so they could just pick it up and, read a chapter on self-management strategies and be able to implement self-management strategies in their classroom or at their home with their child. And, just try and make it really practical.
Would you like to give some final thoughts about what you would like us to be sure and come away with?
There's kind of the big picture, and then there's the more smaller detailed picture. It's kind of micro and macro analysis. So right. There's a quote by Helen Keller that I'll paraphrase that I really like, and it's that people with disabilities need lives worth living. And that's always struck me as something we want. That's the outcome that we want. We want people to have lives that are worth living. I mean, we want that for our children. We want that for ourselves. We want that for, everybody. But for a lot of people with disabilities, they don't have lives that are that great. They live in poverty and they live in not nice places to live and they don't have any friends and they're not part of their community. And we don't want people to have those lives. We want them to have really good lives. And then the kind of micro analysis is, well, how do we get them there? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, what's the point of education? Well, it's to give somebody skills to be successful as an adult. And, it can be social skills or community living skills or function skills, but we need to teach them those skills when they're in the K-12 system and in college and even as they're adults. And we all need to keep learning and, growing and doing new things and so on. But it's how do you get down to the nitty-gritty of teaching somebody how to brush their teeth or how to read or how to take a bus or how to cross the street or how to have friends. Those are important things for people to have, but you have to know how to teach them as a teacher or as a parent so that they have that life worth living. So the two intersect really closely, and you can't have one without the other in my mind.
It just occurred to me, there's one other question I want to ask you. So many individuals with disabilities, particularly with ASD, have difficulty communicating with other people, have difficulty in social settings. How do you recommend that be addressed when you're working with young people who may not have a behavior problem, who may not have, who may be doing actually fairly well at school, but just lonely and not able to interact and find it difficult to communicate?
That's a great question, and it's a really complicated answer that will take me about 30 hours to talk through. But I'll give you. I won't torture you with the whole answer. I'll give you a short one. So part of it is what the person wants, do you want to have friends? Do you want to interact socially? But they have to be making an informed choice. It's like here, do you want to go out to eat at a restaurant? Well, if you've never eaten at a restaurant, you don't know. It's like, do you want to have friends and be part of a community and so on? Well, there's different ways to get friends, and there's different ways to be part of the community. So a lot of people with autism are interested in kind of specific things or narrow things. So I'm working with a young man who's very interested in plants, but he has no friends and he doesn't go out and he doesn't socialize. So we're talking with him about, well, there's plant clubs and there's plant groups that get together and, go to a garden and plant things, or they, do these things. So these are some possibilities. So we'd like you to go out and just experience them. It doesn't mean you have to join the club, but we want you to go to the club and see what it's like so that you can make an informed choice that this is something you want to do or is something you don't want to do. But until you get out there and have the opportunity, but you're not making an informed choice, but you also need the skills to be successful in that situation. So it could be teaching some social skills like, how do you greet people? How do you make small talk? Things like that. How do you manage anxiety when you're out there? We all need to have those skills, but some people with autism need specific instruction on how to handle it. So it's on an antecedent basis, teaching them the skills and then supporting them when they're out there so that they're successful.
It's kind of a lot of role playing.
Yeah, it could be role playing. Video modeling is really a great strategy to use for a lot of people, so they can see themselves or see others and analyze it and so on. I'm a big fan of video modeling. So there's a lot of strategies and ways to support people, but we need to know what they want in their lives and help them achieve their goals.
That's a great way to end. Thank you very much. I want people to be able to get in touch with you. So would you like to give them some contact information for you?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. My email at Touro University it's still operational. It's Keith, KEITH .Storey, STOREY at TU.edu. That's for Touro University. And they can email me and I'll be glad to respond to their question. You can go onto my Amazon author page. It shows my books and it has my email there too. I have a Goodreads page as well. So I'm glad to, respond to emails or talk with people or whatever the case might be. I love this stuff and it's my career. And, I could go on and on and on about all this stuff.
Well, I get to see you. They're not going to get to see you, but I can see your face light up as you talk about some of these things.
It's probably good that they're not seeing you.
Very excited about it. They can also find you on LinkedIn if they need to find you.
That's true.
If they forget, but you are on LinkedIn.
There's also ResearchGate, which is a place where academics post papers. So you can go on there and see, read articles that I've written. So if you're having insomnia, get a couple of my articles and read through them, and it's pretty much a guaranteed cure.
I am going to post as many of these as I can. Thank you so much for being with us today. I very much appreciate your giving me the time that you've given me. And I know when people hear what you have to say, they will feel that this conversation has been very worthwhile. I hope everyone will go to justeducationfirst.com or iTunes or YouTube or Spotify to follow our podcast, to look over our guests, and to look over our topics and see if there's anything that you might be interested in hearing about. I would certainly like to hear from you as to your thoughts on who you might want to hear on our podcast, as well as topics that you might want to hear more about. Thank you all for being with us today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, mentors, for being with us today. If you found this podcast of value, please visit justeducationfirst.com to subscribe to our blog and Mentorship and Education podcast so that you may continue the exploration with us. Our goal is to provide a free treasury of information for our listeners so they can become acquainted with the amazing resources that we have available to us. We want to thank all of our guests for giving their time and sharing their wealth of information with us. Please also visit their websites and explore more of their resources to further your pursuit of the topic. Hope to hear from you at justeducationfirst.com. Have a good week, and thank you.